trend that we've been reporting on for quite a few weeks now, and once again there is a reconfirmation that Bharat may be leading the consumer and consumption revival in India. Britannia's commentary after their numbers today also underlined this. We've seen a report from Nielsen also saying this late last week. But what are the nuances of this consumption trend? Is it still pent-up demand that we are seeing? Is it because of the kind of migration we saw from cities to villages and towns? Will this reverse when the reverse migration begins? To understand what really is going on and how heartening or how much heart we can take from these numbers, I'm joined now by Mayank Shah, category head of Parle Products. Harish Bijoor, brand guru, speaks with us on the show today, and I'm also pleased to welcome Rahul Prithiani, director at CRISIL Research. Welcome to all of you. Mayank, you and I have had an opportunity to speak a couple of times now on the way consumption trends have been moving, and it's been an upward trajectory. Do you think we're stabilizing now and we're seeing most of pre-COVID consumption coming back, which mind you wasn't optimum either, but we have come back to those levels?
Yeah, so, talking about FMCG, I think, most FMCG categories are now coming back to pre-COVID levels. In fact, food has been an exception. Food has been doing extremely well. And last time also when we were discussing, I had talked about how food will lead the charge of revival. So that's what is happening right now. We are seeing, food doing relatively better. Non-food categories are also, doing better. If you talk about, the unlock one, non-food has done, in fact, a little better than food. That may be partly because of the pent-up demand, as you say, but we expect going forward with the onset of festive season, FMCG as a whole will, keep doing better and would drive or rather, lead the charge of revival and demand.
Mayank, what is the upside though? What is the upside though? Because we know that a lot of this consumption, and especially of packaged foods, has been driven by the kind of situation that everyone finds themselves in. People want to buy larger packs. A small element of hoarding is also going on. Do you see this as sustainable, and is there more growth opportunity there?
Yeah, so as far as sustainability is concerned, I think, we all will agree to a fact that, it's not that, we're going to go back to normal any soon. The way things are panning out, I think, we are going to have this kind of a scenario, a new normal kind of a thing, and at least for, some more months to come. So at least for some more months to come, we, feel that, we'll have strong demand coming in. And post which, I think, primarily as a result of, formation of habit of quite a few, especially food, if I'm talking about quite a few categories, consumers would continue, consuming those categories. And maybe there might be a slight tapering of, growth. But if we compare it with pre-COVID periods, it would still be higher. The new normal would be still higher than that of pre-COVID times.
Okay, Rahul Prithiani, how do you look at the narrative that is forming? Now we are in enough months of the post-COVID scenario to see some sort of a trend. Do you still see a trend in flux, some pent-up demand driving these categories? And do you see slowly a replacement of unbranded products with packaged branded products even in rural areas?
So I think clearly what we are seeing is as the pandemic period and the lockdown and the unlocks have kind of, evolved over the last 3-4 months, I think some patterns have clearly changed. So clearly, I think April was a month where you saw immense disruption. I think everybody was trying to figure out their distribution, supply chain, even some new avenues of sales in terms of, greater penetration on the delivery side, e-commerce. I think people were figuring that out. But slowly, as we've gone on in the month of May and moving into June, I think by June, you had an unlock also coming through at many places. So most of the people kind of, figured out their entire distribution. And also there was some pent-up demand which was there in the market, especially in the categories which are discretionary in nature. Food, for instance, would clearly not be a discretionary category. There the demand was, already there, even way before. But in some of the discretionary categories, I think we clearly saw things improving substantially in the month of June. But with the relock again happening, so some of the discretionary segments which are non-food linked, one would really have to see how things evolve over the next few months. This again, shutdowns that we are seeing in the month of July does pose some concerns, and it looks like in the rainy season it will be a stop-start kind of affair. And also there was an element of replenishment of supply chain in terms of the inventory, how they needed some adjustment. So some of those kind of changes are materializing on the ground. So there's no doubt that the demand environment is going to be clearly challenging in categories which are discretionary in nature, maybe food, at home, do it yourself, some of those kind of categories, I think they are benefiting on account of the shutdown, what is there. But at the same time, there are other categories, say in personal care, etc., where you would have discretionary spend. You are holding back on, how you would spend. So one would have to see how this really plays out until we enter the second half of the year. I think that is when clarity in terms of trends will emerge. And in the month of July, August, I think some more degree of clarity will emerge in terms of the actual demand on the ground. A lot of it could have also been driven by, inventory related stuff that will be more relevant for the discretionary based product.
Okay, so when you're saying discretionary, we're talking about beauty products, healthcare products, which are, or your creams, etc., which are seeing some sort of a bounce back. Harish Bijoor, how do you look at this? I mean, the whole narrative in April, May was, job losses, spends being curbed. Do you think that whole story has stabilized now?
Well, sadly, not yet. Because what has happened is the lockdown months, every successive one, right up to lockdown 5.0, through which we're going through now in many cities. What's really happened is there's been a redefinition, and the redefinition has divided the market into essentials and non-essentials. And in the case of essentials, I mean, there has been interest. And even in the essentials, you have to build a hierarchy. And right at the top are essentials which aren't very essential. And by that, I mean, typically cosmetics. Cosmetics have gone out of the window. We've been researching both urban markets, tier 2 markets, 3, and right up to R1 to R6 rural markets over the last 4 weeks. I don't see that buoyancy as yet. But what we see as buoyancy happens in rural markets, and bulk of it is due to the return of the prodigal sons back, the return of migrant labor, and bring the migrant labor bringing urban consumption habits into rural markets, and rural shops actually articulating demand even for the larger packs in every space that you look at. But the good news is for essential categories, which have become the lowest common denominator popular categories. Biscuits, and Mayank is here from Parle Biscuits. Biscuits is really on a good boom mood. But then again, it's biscuits at the lower end of the hierarchy at this point of time, in terms of pricing, in terms of imagery. So what's really happened is we have redefined markets. And if I'm looking at a new movie, the new movie around should be, honey, we shrunk the markets. Fundamentally because we've shrunk the markets from top end, higher common denominator products to lower common denominator products.
Mayank, what is your sense? Now that supply chains have more or less stabilized, do you think that this is becoming a rural India Bharat story where some of the higher end categories which cater to urban India will also find takers? Or we're going to have to wait for those parameters to shift once more?
Yeah, so, for the rural or for Bharat, I don't think, those categories would, in current scenario, make sense. There are two reasons. One is, while they are better off, they are less affected by COVID. And as we see, if we look at the contraction rates, if we look at the impact of COVID, that's largely felt in urban India, especially metros. Rural, that way, even as we speak today, is relatively isolated. And life, goes pretty much like what it was in pre-COVID times in large part of rural India. So that's one. Another thing about rural India or Bharat is three very important stimulus given by government. One is Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, where they are till November giving, 5 rupees per kg rice and 2 rupees per kg wheat, 5 kg every month per person, plus 1 kg pulses, which was recently added all the way till November. So that takes care of basically, food safety, food security of rural consumers. Add to it the Narega, where the wages have gone up from last year's 182 rupees to 202 rupees, per day this year. And assuming there are, probably on an average about 2 job cards per family in the rural India, you are assured of at least about 40,000 rupees annual income. And the third stimulus is the direct cash, transfer, direct benefit transfer in terms of cash to Kisan accounts. These three things put together, I think, at least assures you that, the demand from rural India or rural demand would be taken care of. They would have enough cash in their hands. Of course, they would be more value conscious than they would have been otherwise, because they would like to stretch every rupee that they have, that they get in the current situation. But given that, the food security is there, food safety is there, that's been taken care of, I think you will not really see major, concern on demand front in rural India. So as I said, they will try to drive maximum value out of every rupee that they will be spending in the rural India. We'll continue seeing, basic varieties doing well, smaller packs doing well in rural India. And that's what would be driving growth for FMCG in rural India, and not the premium varieties, which otherwise would be doing better. Not even the LUPs of premium varieties, given the situation.
That's true. I want to go beyond just the FMCG story, Rahul, and just get your view. Obviously, your travel, hospitality, dining out, and all of that is pretty subdued. I think those industries and those sectors are just trying to get by. But are you seeing new ways of reviving those consumption patterns, moving things online, finding new ways to reach customers who still, have an appetite? Do you think that those new supply chains, post-COVID supply chains, will also stabilize?
So I think in the post-COVID scenario, I think the thought process of the consumer has kind of changed quite a lot, given the kind of health care that is there. I think one key thing that we are, clearly seeing from a customer point of view is the focus on hygiene. And the focus on hygiene kind of, enhances the need and the play for some of the brands, stronger brands, and some of the larger players who are there in the market. And even beyond, say, the FMCG space, if one looks at the segments such as restaurants, QSRs, I think clearly this is one segment which has been hit very, very hard. And in the case of restaurants, our view is, I think you're looking at a very, very sharp fall, and you see a very, very high mortality rate in this segment. But at the same time, what we are clearly seeing is some of the players who have got relatively stronger brands, some of the QSR players, I think they have re-looked at their overall distribution, their connect on in terms of online. You've got enough examples of them tying up with some of the delivery spaces, and also delivering direct to customer, and ensuring there is a health and hygiene quotient which is maintained and well communicated to the customer. So I think this is something that they have had to do. And in some of those segments, I think we have seen a bit of a pickup, because there is clearly a pent-up demand. And eating at home, probably, a lot of people are almost, fed up. There are a lot of ways, even the women folk in the homes, they need a relief. So to that extent, you are seeing some changes. You are also seeing interesting things like categories like do-it-your-home food, some other categories, some premium food, even in some of these areas, then refrigerated food. I think some of those categories are seeing good traction. And also some of the branded QSRs, they are doing relatively better, I would say, in this market. And going forward, I think the focus is clearly there, and a lot of them are going to realign their strategies, and they are going to have to. It's not if and but it's clearly for survival. given the kind of environment that exists. But clearly, if you look at it from a structural point of view, there is a pent-up demand that is there in pockets. But having said that, at a large scale, in terms of affordability, the willingness of customers to go ahead and spend a lot, on eating out, I think that will be by and large challenged. What we've seen is, I think we analyzed about 40,000 plus companies, the largest companies in the country. I think we looked at their wage bill. The largest companies where, the wage bill comprised of almost 55% of the overall wage bill, I think is from sectors which are vulnerable, according to us, in the post-COVID scenario, sectors such as real estate, construction, airlines, some of the other services related industries. So that clearly shows, from a customer standpoint, there is this pressure that is there on consumption. They would want to spend wisely, but clearly hygiene will be a key focus area.
Well put, consumer is king right now, not feeling very king-like, and that's going to impact. But we are seeing, at least in some categories which are necessary, we are seeing those levels stay up, and we can take some succor from that. I want to thank all of you for joining us on the discussion, but we're not yet done with our consumption story this evening. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, do tune in to the exclusive interview. Britannia's Varun Berry has given ET Now on how he sees consumption trends evolve.